I got a text at 11:47 p.m. from a number I didn't recognize. 6 words, that's all it took to make my knees give out. I was standing in the middle of my Brooklyn apartment. No lights on. Just the glow of my phone screen cutting through the darkness like a blade. The message read, "I know what you did, Ellery." My hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped the phone. Not because someone had my number, not because they used my name, but because of what came next, a photo attachment. One single image that told me whoever this person was, they weren't guessing. They weren't fishing. They had been close. Close enough to see things I thought no one could see. I stared at that photo for maybe 10 seconds. Felt like 10 years. My throat closed up. My chest got tight. The walls of my apartment seemed to press inward, shrinking the space around me until I could barely breathe. And then I heard the footsteps behind me. Not heavy footsteps, not threatening. Small ones, soft ones, the kind that pad across hardwood floors in fuzzy socks. Mommy? I turned around, and there was my daughter, Mari, 7 years old, standing in the hallway in her little lavender pajamas with the stars on them. Her hair was messy from sleep. Her eyes were wide, confused, scanning my face the way children do when they know something is wrong but don't have the language to ask the right question. "Why are you standing in the dark?" she asked. I locked my phone, slid it behind my back like it was a weapon I was hiding. "I'm fine, baby. Go back to bed." She didn't move. She just stared at me. And I realized, standing there in that dark apartment, that my daughter was looking at me the same way I used to look at my own mother, trying to figure out which version of her she was going to get. The calm one, or the one who was barely holding it together. I walked over, scooped her up, carried her back to her room, tucked her in, kissed her forehead, told her everything was okay. Everything was not okay, because 5 minutes before that text came in, a man had walked out of my apartment. A man I hadn't spoken to in 10 years. A man whose name I had trained myself to forget. Scrubbed from my memory like graffiti off a wall. Maron Callister. Just thinking his name made something twist in my chest. Something old. Something I'd buried so deep I thought it could never reach the surface again. But there he had been, standing in my living room, looking at me with those same dark eyes that used to make me forget my own name. Older now. The boyishness I remembered had sharpened into something more severe. Lines around his eyes. A weariness in his posture. But unmistakably him. He'd found me somehow. Showed up at my door without warning. And we'd talked for hours. About the past. About the years we'd lost. About things I'd never let myself think about since the day I walked away from him. Somewhere in the middle of all that talking, something unlocked inside me. Something dangerous. Something I'd kept caged for a decade. He left around 11:30. I walked him to the door. He hesitated, like he wanted to say something else. Then he just nodded, turned around, and disappeared down the hallway. 17 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, 6 words on the screen, and a photo that made my blood run cold. Someone had been watching. Someone knew things about my life that I'd buried so deep I'd almost forgotten them myself. And in that moment, staring at that message, I understood something with a clarity that almost knocked me sideways. The lie I'd been living wasn't my husband's affair. It wasn't the divorce. The biggest lie was the one I'd been telling myself for 10 years, that I'd made the right choice, that walking away from Maron was the smart decision, that choosing safety over passion was the mature thing to do, that I didn't still think about him every single day. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Standing here in this dark apartment, phone burning in my hand, daughter asleep down the hall, I'm jumping to the end of a story you don't even know yet. And if you're going to understand why that night nearly destroyed me, why that text message felt like a bomb going off in the center of my life, you need to know how I got here. You need to understand what I was running from, and what I was running toward. It all starts 6 months ago, before Maron showed up at my door, before the anonymous texts, before I realized that everything I thought I knew about my life was built on a foundation of lies. It starts with a Saturday morning, the kind of morning that tricks you into thinking everything is fine. The kind where the sun is coming through the kitchen window, and your daughter is laughing, and the smell of breakfast fills the apartment like a promise. It starts with blueberry pancakes, and it starts with the 4 words that ended my marriage. But before we go there, I need you to understand something. I'm not telling you this story because I want sympathy. I'm not looking for validation or pity or someone to tell me I made the right choices. I'm telling you this because I need someone to hear it. Because I've been carrying it alone for too long. And because maybe, just maybe, somewhere out there, someone is standing in their own dark apartment, holding their own phone, wondering how their life fell apart so fast. If that's you, keep listening. This is my story. The real one. Not the version I told my mother or my co-workers or the lawyers who handled my divorce. The version I've never told anyone. Until now. That Saturday started the way most Saturdays did in my house. Quiet. Routine. The kind of morning you don't appreciate until it's ripped away from you. I was standing at the stove, making blueberry pancakes. It was our tradition. Had been since Mari was old enough to sit in a high chair and smear purple batter across her face. Every Saturday, same routine. Pancakes, cartoons, family time. The kind of ritual you build a life around without realizing it. Mari was at the kitchen table, swinging her legs back and forth, coloring in a princess book. Her tongue poked out the side of her mouth the way it always did when she was concentrating. The sunlight was streaming through the window. Coffee was brewing on the counter. Everything looked normal. But something was off. I burned the first batch. I never burn pancakes. My hand was trembling when I flipped them, and I didn't even notice until the smoke alarm started screaming at me. "Mommy, it's loud." Mari covered her ears, giggling like it was a game. I waved a dish towel at the alarm until it stopped, scraped the charred mess into the trash, started over, told myself it was just the lack of sleep, just the stress, just the weight of everything I'd been pretending not to notice for months. My husband, Corbin, was still upstairs. I could hear him moving around in the bedroom, getting dressed. He'd been up there for over an hour, unusual for a Saturday, when he usually slept until noon. My gut had been telling me something for weeks, maybe months. That quiet voice in the back of your head that notices things your conscious mind refuses to see. The late nights at the office, the phone turned face down on the counter, the way he looked through me instead of at me. I kept ignoring it, kept telling myself I was being paranoid. Then I heard his footsteps on the stairs. I looked up from the stove, and there he was, standing in the kitchen doorway, dressed in the blue Oxford shirt I'd saved 3 months to buy him for his birthday last year. The one he said was too nice for every day, and hung in the back of the closet with the tags still on. He'd cut the tags off, pressed it, paired it with the Hermes tie I'd given him for our 5th anniversary. He looked like a man going to an important meeting, not a man coming down for Saturday pancakes with his family. "Daddy!" Mari jumped up from her chair, arms outstretched. Corbin smiled at her. But it was the wrong smile. The practiced one. The one he used at client dinners when he was pretending to care about someone's golf handicap. He hugged her quickly, kissed the top of her head, then looked at me over her shoulder. His eyes were flat, rehearsed. He'd been practicing this moment in the mirror. I could tell. "Ellery, we need to talk." 4 words, delivered like a press release. No emotion, no hesitation. Just a man reading from a script he'd memorized. That's how it started. That's the moment everything changed. And before I take you there, before I tell you exactly what he said and how my world collapsed in the time it takes to burn a pancake, if you're new here, welcome. If you're coming back, welcome home. Hit that subscribe button right now because trust me, you do not want to miss where this story goes. Now, let me tell you about the 4 words that came next, and the name that shattered everything I thought I knew about my marriage. Mari looked between us, her little face scrunching with confusion. "Talk about what?" I forced a smile. The kind mothers learn to produce on command when everything inside them is screaming. "Grown-up stuff, baby. Why don't you go watch cartoons in the living room? Mommy will bring you more pancakes in a minute." "But I want to stay with Daddy." "I know." I walked over, took her hand, led her toward the living room. "But Daddy and I need a few minutes, okay? You can pick any show you want, even the loud one with the singing animals." That got her. She ran to the couch, grabbed the remote, and within seconds, cartoon music was filling the apartment. Bright colors, cheerful voices, the soundtrack of childhood innocence playing against what was about to become the worst conversation of my life. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her settle in, wishing I could freeze time, keep her in this moment forever, where the worst thing in her world was waiting for pancakes. Then I turned around and walked back to the kitchen. Corbin was standing exactly where I'd left him, hands at his sides, shoulders squared. He looked like a man about to deliver a verdict. Like this was a courtroom, and I was the defendant who hadn't been told what I was charged with. I leaned against the counter and crossed my arms. Didn't say anything, just waited. Let the silence stretch between us until it became unbearable. I'd learned that trick years ago. The person who speaks first in an uncomfortable silence usually reveals more than they intend to. He cleared his throat. "This isn't easy for me." "I'm sure it isn't. I've been thinking a lot. About us. About what I want. About what's fair to everyone." Fair. I repeated the word like it tasted rotten. Interesting word choice. He shifted his weight, the first crack in his composure. "I think we both know this hasn't been working, for a while now. Say it." My voice came out harder than I expected. "Whatever you've been practicing in front of the bathroom mirror for the past week, whatever speech you memorized on your drive home last night, just say it, Corbin. Stop dancing around it like I'm too fragile to hear the truth." He flinched, just slightly. Most people wouldn't have noticed, but I'd been married to this man for 9 years. I knew every micro-expression, every tell, every shift in his breathing pattern. "I want a divorce." There it was, the sentence I'd been dreading for months. The one I'd heard in nightmares, woken up sweating from, then convinced myself was just anxiety. Just paranoia. Just my imagination running wild. Except, it wasn't imagination, it was reality. Standing in my kitchen in a birthday shirt he'd never bothered to wear until the day he decided to leave me. "Okay." I kept my voice steady. "And who is she?" His jaw tightened. "Ellery." "Don't." I held up my hand. "You want to have this conversation like adults, then have it like an adult. Don't pretend this is about what's fair or what's working. Don't insult me. You've been coming home smelling like someone else's perfume for months. You think I don't notice? You think I'm stupid?" Silence. Long. Heavy. The cartoon music from the living room felt grotesque against the weight of what was happening in this kitchen. Cheerful melodies about friendship and adventure while my marriage was dying 3 rooms away. "Her name is Brinley." Brinley. Of course, not a common name, not someone forgettable. Brinley. The kind of name that would stick in my head for years. How long? He looked at the floor. 8 months. 8 months. I did the math instantly. 8 months ago was right after Christmas. Right after I'd spent 3 weeks finding him the perfect gift, a vintage watch I'd saved for months to afford. Right after we'd taken family photos for our holiday card, all 3 of us smiling like everything was fine. "So, through Christmas," I said slowly. "Through Murray's birthday party in February, through our anniversary in April." He didn't answer. Didn't need to. "Through our anniversary," I repeated, each word landing like a hammer. "When you took me to that restaurant in the city and told me you couldn't imagine your life without me. You were already sleeping with her then." "It's complicated." "It's not complicated at all." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Just something sharp and broken. "You wanted something new, you found it, and you kept lying to my face while you had it. The only complicated part is how long it took you to finally admit it." He straightened up, slipped back into his boardroom voice, the one he used with clients when he was negotiating terms they wouldn't like. "I've already talked to a lawyer. We can do this amicably if you're willing. Split custody, divide assets fairly. I'm not trying to take anything from you." How generous. "I'm serious, Ellery. This doesn't have to be a war." I stared at him. This man I'd married at 25. This man I'd built a life with. A home with. a child with, and all I could see was a stranger in an expensive shirt, negotiating the terms of my destruction like it was a business deal. The audacity of it almost took my breath away. He'd been lying to me for 8 months, sleeping with another woman while I cooked his dinners and washed his clothes and raised his daughter. "There's only one thing I need you to understand," I said, pushing off from the counter, stepping closer to him. "And I need you to hear me clearly, because I'm only going to say this once." He waited. For the first time since he'd walked into the kitchen, he looked uncertain. "You can have the divorce, you can have Brinley, you can have whatever fresh start you've convinced yourself you deserve." I stopped 2 feet in front of him, close enough to see the tiny vein pulsing in his temple. "But you're not taking her. Mari stays with me." "That's not how custody works." "I don't care how custody works." My voice dropped to something low and dangerous. "I care about my daughter, and I'm telling you right now, you can fight me on assets, you can fight me on the apartment, you can fight me on every single thing we ever bought together. But if you try to take her from me, I will make the next 10 years of your life a living nightmare. And you know I mean it." He stared at me. Seconds stretched into an eternity, and then, slowly, he nodded. "I don't want to take her from you. I just want to be part of her life. Then we'll figure that out, but not today. Today, you're going to walk out that door. You're going to give me space to process what you just dropped on me. And you're going to let me figure out how to explain to our 7-year-old daughter why her father isn't coming home anymore." He reached for his keys on the counter, straightened his tie, the tie I'd given him, the tie he was wearing to leave me. The irony wasn't lost on me. "I'll call you tomorrow," he said. "We can talk about logistics." "Logistics?" I almost laughed again. "Sure, logistics." He walked toward the front door, stopped, turned back like he wanted to say something else, something human, something real, but nothing came out. He just stood there for a moment, looking at me like he was seeing me for the first time in years. Then he left. The front door clicked shut behind him. Soft, quiet, not even a slam. Just a man leaving like he was walking out of a conference room. 9 years of marriage, and he couldn't even give me the dignity of a fight. I stood in the kitchen, motionless. The pancake batter was congealing on the counter. The burner was still on, glowing red. The cartoon music was still playing from the living room, all bright colors and cheerful voices. My hands were shaking. My chest felt hollow. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to collapse on the floor and sob until I had nothing left. But I didn't, because Mari was in the next room, because she needed me to hold it together, because falling apart was a luxury I couldn't afford. I turned off the stove, dumped the batter in the sink, ran the water, watched it swirl down the drain. Then I dried my hands, fixed my face, and walked into the living room. Mari looked up at me from the couch, her eyes searching. "Where did Daddy go?" "He had to run some errands, baby." "Is he coming back for pancakes?" I sat down next to her, pulled her into my arms, breathed in the smell of her shampoo, strawberry, her favorite. "Not today," I said quietly. "But it's okay. We're going to be okay." She accepted that answer, turned back to her cartoons, curled into my side like nothing was wrong. And I sat there holding her, watching animated characters sing about happiness, while my entire world crumbled silently around me. 3 weeks passed. I don't remember most of them. That's not poetic exaggeration. That's the truth. Grief does something strange to your memory. It takes entire days and compresses them into nothing. You wake up, you go through the motions. You feed your child, drive her to school, smile at neighbors, answer emails, buy groceries. And at the end of it, you can't recall a single specific moment. It's all just fog. Corbin moved out the day after that Saturday, packed a suitcase, kissed Mari goodbye, promised her he'd see her soon. She cried. I didn't. I stood in the doorway and watched him load his things into the trunk of his car, and I felt absolutely nothing. The numbness was a mercy at first. It protected me, let me function when functioning felt impossible. I could cook dinner without crying, I could read Maori bedtime stories without my voice cracking. I could lie in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, and feel nothing but a vast, empty quiet where my feelings used to be. But numbness doesn't last. It's not a cure. It's just the calm before the real storm hits. People called. My mother. My sister in Chicago. Friends from work I hadn't spoken to in months. They said things like, "I'm so sorry, and you deserve better, and let me know if you need anything." I thanked them, told them I was fine, hung up and stared at the wall for hours. The apartment felt too big. Every room held memories I couldn't escape. The couch where we used to watch movies, the kitchen table where we ate family dinners, the bedroom where I now slept alone, sprawled across a mattress that felt like an ocean. Mari was the only thing that kept me tethered to reality. Her questions, her needs, the way she'd crawl into my bed at night and curl up against me. She knew something was wrong. Kids always know. But she didn't ask about it directly, just stayed close, watched me with those big, careful eyes, like she was waiting for me to break and wanted to be there when it happened. I tried to keep things normal for her, made breakfast every morning, helped with homework every night, took her to the park on weekends, pushed her on the swings, pretended to be fully present when my mind was 1,000 miles away. But I was disappearing, bit by bit. The stress had carved pieces out of me I hadn't noticed losing until my jeans stopped fitting right, and my mother commented on my collarbones at dinner. I ate when I remembered, slept when my body forced me to, spent most of my energy on Mari, which meant there was very little left for myself. 3 weeks in, I started cleaning. Not normal cleaning. Obsessive cleaning. The kind where you reorganize closets at 2 in the morning because sleeping feels like a waste of time. The kind where you scrub floors that are already clean just to feel like you're accomplishing something. The kind where you throw away anything that reminds you of him. Birthday cards, receipts from dinners, the anniversary present he'd never bothered to open. I told myself I was getting rid of the past, making space for something new, but really, I was just trying to exhaust myself enough to sleep without dreaming. It worked, mostly, until the night I found the shoebox. It was buried in the back of my closet, behind winter coats I hadn't worn in years. Hidden beneath a stack of old sweaters I kept meaning to donate. I didn't recognize it at first. Pulled it out, brushed off the dust, tried to remember what I'd stored in there. My hands hesitated on the lid. Something in my gut told me not to open it. I opened it anyway. Because that's what we do, isn't it? We can't leave the past alone, even when we know it's going to hurt us. Inside the shoebox, time collapsed. A movie ticket stub, faded blue ink on cardboard, barely legible. Midnight showing, Casablanca. I remembered that night instantly. The cramped theater with the broken air conditioning, the stranger beside me who laughed at all the right moments, the way he walked me home through streets that felt safer with him beside me. A dried flower, pressed flat between the pages of a poetry book. Its petals had turned brown and brittle over the years, but I could still remember when it was fresh, when he'd handed it to me in Central Park, slightly embarrassed, saying he'd seen it and thought of me. A photograph, Polaroid, the two of us at Coney Island, my hair blowing in the wind, his arm around my shoulder, both of us squinting against the sun. We looked impossibly young, impossibly happy, like two people who had no idea what was coming. And at the bottom, folded carefully like something precious, a handwritten note on yellow legal paper. His handwriting, messy, slanted, unmistakable. "You don't know it yet, but you're going to change everything." I sat on the closet floor, holding that note, and something inside me cracked open. Maron Callister. I hadn't said his name out loud in 10 years. Hadn't let myself think about him. Not really. I'd taken every memory of him and sealed it away like evidence from a crime scene. Buried it so deep I almost convinced myself it had never happened. But I'd kept this box. Through 2 apartments. Through my engagement. Through 9 years of marriage. Through a pregnancy and a child and a divorce. I'd carried this box with me everywhere. Why? Why do we keep things we're supposed to have forgotten? Why do we carry ghosts in shoeboxes and pretend they don't exist? I stared at that note until the words blurred. And for the first time since Corbin walked out, I felt something. Not numbness, not anger. Something deeper, something older. A grief I'd been carrying for a decade without ever acknowledging it. You don't forget someone like Maron Callister. That's a lie we tell ourselves to survive. The truth is, you bury them. You take everything they made you feel, the electricity, the fear, the certainty that you'd never feel this way again, and you put it somewhere deep where it can't reach you. You build a life on top of their grave and convince yourself the ground beneath you is solid. But it's not. It never was. Sitting on that closet floor, surrounded by the debris of a life that had just collapsed, I realized something I'd been avoiding for 10 years. Corbin was never the love of my life. He was the safe choice, the practical choice, the choice I made because I was scared of what choosing Maron would have meant. And I'd spent nearly a decade convincing myself that safe was the same as right. The affair hurt. The betrayal stung. But what really kept me awake at night, what really made me feel like I was suffocating, wasn't losing Corbin. It was the realization that I might have wasted 10 years on someone I never really loved. And the man I did love, the one who made me feel alive in ways I'd forgotten were possible, I'd walked away from him, pushed him away, told him we had no future, and he'd believed me. I closed the box, shoved it back into the closet, tried to pretend I hadn't seen it, but the damage was done. The seal was broken, and somewhere in the back of my mind, a door I'd locked 10 years ago had just swung open. I couldn't stop thinking about him. During the day, while I was working. At night, while Mari slept down the hall. In the quiet moments between tasks, his face would appear unbidden. His voice would echo in my memory. The way he used to look at me, like I was the most fascinating person he'd ever met. I hadn't felt that way in years. Maybe I'd never felt that way with Corbin. Maybe I'd just convinced myself I had, because it was easier than admitting the truth. The truth was ugly. The truth was that I'd chosen wrong. That I'd been given something rare and precious and terrifying, and I'd run from it because I was afraid. Afraid of being hurt. Afraid of losing myself. Afraid that loving someone that much would destroy me if it ever ended. So I'd chosen someone who felt manageable, someone who didn't set my soul on fire, someone I could control. And look where that got me. I went to bed that night with Maron's face in my mind. Woke up the next morning with his name on my lips. And I knew, with the kind of certainty that settles in your bones, that I was about to do something dangerous. I was about to remember everything I'd spent 10 years trying to forget. But before I could go forward, I needed to go back. Back to the beginning. Back to the summer. I was 22 years old, broke, exhausted, and utterly unprepared for the man who was about to walk into my life and change everything. That's where this really starts. The summer I met Maron Callister, 10 years earlier. Summer. I was 22 and completely broke. I was working 2 jobs, administrative assistant at a small marketing firm during the day, waitress at an upscale Italian restaurant at night. My apartment in Queens was the size of a walk-in closet. My bank account rarely had more than $300 in it. I ate ramen for dinner more nights than I care to admit and called it budgeting. But despite everything, I was alive in a way I haven't been since. New York did that to you when you were young and hungry. The city felt like a promise, even when it was breaking you. Every street held possibility. Every stranger could be the person who changed your life. You walked through Manhattan believing that something extraordinary was just around the corner, even when your feet ached and your wallet was empty. The restaurant where I waitressed was called Fontana's. White tablecloths, $20 pasta dishes, wine lists that read like novels. The clientele were mostly businessmen impressing clients, couples celebrating anniversaries, tourists who'd read about the place in a travel magazine. I was invisible to most of them. Just a girl in a black apron, refilling water glasses and reciting specials. They looked through me, not at me. I was part of the furniture, part of the ambiance, not a real person with a real life. That's what made Maron different. It was a Tuesday night in July. The restaurant was half empty, slow night. mostly regulars nursing expensive wine and checking their phones. I was assigned to a two-top near the window. A man sat alone, staring at the menu like he was reading a foreign language. He looked out of place. His suit was expensive. I could tell that much even from across the room. But he wore it uncomfortably, like a costume he'd borrowed for the evening. His hair was slightly messy. His tie was loosened. Everything about him suggested someone who'd rather be somewhere else entirely. I walked over with my notepad, prepared to deliver the standard greeting. But before I could speak, he looked up at me, and something shifted. He didn't look through me. He looked at me, actually saw me. It was such a simple thing, but after months of being invisible, it felt almost startling. "Just water, please," he said. His voice was warm, a little tired. "Are you waiting for someone?" "My sister. She's chronically late." He smiled slightly. "I'll probably be here a while." She never showed. I kept refilling his water, bringing him bread, checking on him every few minutes because my manager was watching and empty tables didn't make tips. Each time I approached, he looked up from his phone with this expression, not annoyance, not impatience, but something like relief, like he was grateful for the interruption. Around 9 o'clock, the restaurant started clearing out. He was still there, still alone, still nursing the same glass of water, the bread basket mostly untouched. "She's not coming, is she?" I asked. He laughed. Not bitter, just tired, resigned. "No, she's not." He paused, looking at me, really looking, studying me with an intensity that should have made me uncomfortable but somehow didn't, and his eyes landed on my hand. "You've got ink on your thumb." I looked down. Blue ink, smeared across the skin near my nail, from scribbling notes during my day job, drafting copy for a campaign no one would ever credit me for. "Occupational hazard," I said. "You're a writer." The question caught me off guard. "I'm an administrative assistant, but I write sometimes, when I'm not too exhausted." He leaned back in his chair. "What do you write?" No one had ever asked me that before. Not once. My friends didn't know I wrote. My family thought it was a hobby I'd outgrow. My co-workers saw me as the girl who fetched coffee and organized files. The idea that I might have an inner life, that I might create things, that I might have dreams beyond answering phones and paying rent, it never occurred to them. But this stranger, this man in the expensive suit who didn't know my name, had looked at an ink stain on my thumb and seen something more. "Stories, mostly," I heard myself saying, "about people who feel stuck, who want more than they're supposed to want." He nodded slowly, like this was exactly the answer he expected. "That sounds like something I'd want to read." We talked until midnight. I don't know how it happened. One minute I was his waitress, clearing plates and checking my watch. The next, my shift was over, and I was sitting across from him in the empty restaurant, drinking wine he'd ordered, and talking like I'd known him my entire life. His name was Maron Callister. He told me about his sister who never showed, Camille, the irresponsible one, the family favorite who could do no wrong despite doing everything wrong. He told me about feeling trapped in a life he'd never chosen, about being expected to follow paths he'd never wanted to walk. He didn't mention money, didn't mention his family's name or their business, or any of the things I'd later learn made him one of the wealthiest men in the city. He just talked to me like I was the most interesting person he'd ever met. And I talked back, told him things I'd never told anyone, about my father leaving when I was 12, about my mother working double shifts to keep food on the table, about my fear that I'd spend my whole life being invisible, that no one would ever really see me, that I'd die having never done anything that mattered. He listened, not the way most people listen, waiting for their turn to speak, mentally rehearsing their response. He listened like he was memorizing me, like everything I said mattered, like my fears and dreams and stories were worth holding on to. It was intoxicating, terrifying, unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Over the next 3 months, Maron became everything. We met late at night after my shifts, walked through Central Park at hours when no one else was around, sat on benches and talked about the things you don't tell people you've just met. Except we did. He brought me coffee when I was drowning in work. left notes under my door with poetry I'd never heard of, made me laugh in ways I didn't know I could laugh anymore. He read to me without apology. Not the flowery kind of poetry, the raw kind, lines that cut deep and left marks. He'd recite them from memory, lying on his back in the grass at Sheep Meadow, staring up at the sky, while I lay beside him, and felt my heart doing things I'd never asked it to do. And slowly, carefully, I fell. Not the quick kind of falling, not the infatuation that burns bright and fades fast, the slow kind, the kind where you don't realize it's happening until you're already at the bottom, looking up, wondering how you got there. The first kiss happened at Sheep Meadow. Late August. The city was sweltering, but we'd spread a blanket on the grass anyway, lying side by side, watching the stars compete with the light pollution. "You were everything," he said quietly, not looking at me, looking up. I turned my head. "What do you mean?" "When I walked into that restaurant, when I saw you." He paused, searching for words. "I've spent my whole life surrounded by people who want something from me, my family, my colleagues, everyone. But you looked at me like I was just a guy at a table, like I was nobody, and that was everything." He turned to face me, and then he kissed me, slow and careful, like he was asking permission with every movement, like he knew what this meant and wanted to make sure I knew it too. I kissed him back, and in that moment, I felt more alive than I'd ever felt before. Those 3 months were a different lifetime. Looking back now, it's hard to believe I was ever that version of myself, the girl who stayed up until 3 in the morning, talking to someone who made her feel like magic existed, the girl who laughed so hard she cried, the girl who actually believed that love could be simple. Because it wasn't simple. Nothing with Maron was simple. I didn't know it then, but he was carrying things too. Heavy things. Things he couldn't tell me yet. I'd catch glimpses sometimes. A shadow that crossed his face when I mentioned the future, a hesitation in his voice when I asked about his family. He had secrets. I knew that. I just didn't know how big they were. Now, I need to ask you something. If you were me, 22, broke, finally feeling seen for the first time in your life, and then you discovered the person who saw you was hiding something massive, what would you do? Drop your answer in the comments and tell me, where are you watching from right now? I love seeing how far this community reaches. I didn't know yet that I would be the one to break him. 3 weeks into our relationship, Maron invited me to see his apartment. I thought I knew what to expect. He'd mentioned living on the Upper West Side. I assumed a nice 1-bedroom, maybe with a doorman and a decent view. Something comfortable but modest. The kind of place a guy who seemed allergic to his expensive suits could reasonably afford. I was wrong. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse, not a hallway leading to a door. The elevator itself opened into his living room. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, art on the walls that looked like it belonged in a museum, furniture that probably cost more than my annual salary. I stood there, frozen, trying to process what I was seeing. "This is your apartment?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Thin, distant. Maron walked past me, casual, like this was normal. Like everyone's elevator opened into their living room. "Yeah, I've had it for a few years." "A few years." I repeated the words without understanding them. "You've had this penthouse for a few years." He stopped, turned around, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked uncomfortable. "Ellery, you told me this was a friend's sublet." I gestured at the space around me, the chandelier, the spiral staircase leading to a second floor, the kitchen that looked like it had never been used. "This is not a sublet. This is not a friend's place. What is this, Maron? Who are you?" He was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked to the window, hands in his pockets, staring out at the park like it held answers I couldn't see. "My family owns Callister Industries." The name hit me like cold water. Callister Industries, one of the largest private equity firms on the East Coast. I'd seen the name in newspapers, on buildings, on the sides of charitable foundations. Old money, generational wealth, the kind of fortune that changed families, cities, entire industries. "You're not rich," I said slowly, piecing it together. You're wealthy. There's a difference. He didn't deny it. And you didn't tell me. No. His voice was quiet. I didn't. The silence between us stretched until it became unbearable. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. I wanted to demand explanations, apologies, anything that would make this make sense. Why? The word came out, broken. Why would you hide this from me? Maron turned from the window. His face was pained but not surprised. He'd been expecting this moment, dreading it. Because I wanted you to know me. He took a step closer. Not the money, not the family name, not the expectations or the assumptions or the way people's eyes change when they find out who my father is. I wanted you to know who I actually am, and I didn't know how to do that without hiding the rest. So you lied. I omitted. That's the same thing. He flinched. I know. I looked around the penthouse again. The art, the furniture, the view that probably cost millions. Everything I thought I knew about this man was crumbling. The struggling creative who didn't care about material things. The guy who seemed uncomfortable in fancy restaurants. All of it was performance. I'm a waitress, Maron. My voice cracked on the words. I make $12 an hour plus tips. I share an apartment with a roommate who steals my leftovers. I'm nobody. And you're this. You're not nobody. Don't. I held up my hand. Don't do that. Don't turn this into some romantic speech about how money doesn't matter. Because it does. It changes everything. It changes the power balance. It changes what's possible. It changes who I am when I stand next to you. He moved closer. Close enough to touch. It doesn't have to. Yes, it does. I stepped back. My chest was tight. My eyes were burning. I can't be this, the girl from nowhere who gets swept up by the billionaire. That's not a love story, Maron. That's a cautionary tale. That's the kind of story that ends with me alone and broken while you move on to the next shiny thing. That's not who I am. How would I know? My voice rose despite my best efforts to control it. How would I know who you are? You've been lying to me since the moment we met. Every conversation, every date, every time you let me ramble about my tiny apartment and my pathetic bank account, you were sitting there knowing everything you'd hidden. That's not love, Maron. That's manipulation. He looked like I'd slapped him. Maybe I had, in a way. I was scared, he said quietly. Scared that if you knew the truth, you'd see me differently. Scared that the money would become the thing that defined us. I've lived my whole life watching. People change when they find out who my family is. The way they start calculating, the way they smile differently. I couldn't bear to see that happen with you. So you lied instead. Yes, he met my eyes. And I'm sorry. I should have told you. I was a coward. I wanted to forgive him. Part of me understood, even then. But fear's a powerful thing. I walked back to the elevator, pressed the button, waited for the doors to open. Ellery, please. I need to go. He reached for my arm. I pulled away. The elevator arrived. I stepped inside, turned around, looked at him one last time. I'm sorry, he said. I should have told you sooner. I was scared. I thought I'd lose you. You just did. The doors closed. He tried to reach me. For weeks, my phone lit up with his name. Calls I let go to voicemail. Texts I deleted without reading, flowers that arrived at my apartment, which I left in the hallway for the building to throw away. A letter slipped under my door that I burned in my kitchen sink without opening. I was cruel, I know that now, but at the time, cruelty felt like survival. Every time I saw his name on my screen, something inside me cracked a little more. And I was terrified that if I let myself crack all the way open, I'd never put the pieces back together. So, I shut him out, completely, absolutely. Built a wall so high even I couldn't see over it. 6 months passed. I threw myself into work, picked up extra shifts, started saying yes to every invitation, happy hours, birthday parties, anything that kept me busy, kept me moving, kept me from thinking about him. I was running, and I knew it, but running felt better than standing still. That's how I met Corbin. He was at a coffee shop near my apartment. Sunday morning. I was ordering an iced latte, exhausted from a double shift, probably looking like a disaster. He was sitting at the corner table, reading the Wall Street Journal, looking like exactly the kind of person who reads the Wall Street Journal on a Sunday morning. He caught my eye, smiled, asked if I wanted to join him. I said yes. Corbin was everything Maron wasn't. Stable, predictable, transparent. He was a third-year law student with a 5-year plan and a leather notebook full of goals. He told me about his career ambitions, his family in Connecticut, his belief that life worked out for people who made sensible choices. He didn't make me feel electric. He made me feel safe. And after Maron, after the penthouse, after the lies, safe felt like exactly what I needed. We dated for a year. He proposed on a beach in Rhode Island, with a ring he'd been saving for since his first internship. I said yes. Not because I was in love, not the way I'd been in love before, but because I was tired. Tired of uncertainty, tired of fear, tired of waiting for the other shoe to drop. My mother was thrilled. My friends said I was lucky. Everyone agreed that Corbin was a catch. Dependable, ambitious, heading for success. Nobody asked if he made my heart race. Nobody asked if I stayed up all night talking to him about dreams and fears. Nobody asked if he really saw me. Maybe because they knew the answer. I walked down the aisle in a white dress, smiling for photographs, telling myself this was what happy looked like. Telling myself that passion faded anyway, that stability was what lasted, that I was making the smart choice. I buried Maron so deep I almost convinced myself he never existed. Almost. Because here's the thing about burying people, they don't stay buried. Not really. You might forget where you put them. You might go years without thinking about them, but they're still down there, waiting, patient, quiet, until something or someone digs them back up. And 10 years later, Maron Callister showed up at my door, and everything I'd buried came flooding back. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I barely recognized my own reflection. I'd lost weight, not in a healthy way. The stress had carved pieces out of me that I hadn't noticed losing until my clothes started hanging wrong, and my cheekbones looked sharper than they should. I ate when I remembered, slept when my body demanded it. The rest of the time, I was running on caffeine and willpower and the desperate need to hold things together for my daughter. The house was gone. I couldn't afford to keep it, and honestly, I didn't want to. Every room held ghosts. The kitchen where Corbin had asked for a divorce. The bedroom where I'd lain awake for months, sensing something was wrong, but refusing to name it. The backyard where Mari used to play while her father and I pretended everything was fine. I sold it 3 months after the papers were signed, took the money and found a small apartment in Brooklyn. 2 bedrooms. Decent neighborhood. The kind of place with thin walls and a radiator that clanged in the middle of the night, but it was ours. A fresh start in a building where nobody knew my story. I was rebuilding. That's what I told myself every morning when I woke up in my too quiet bedroom. That's what I repeated when I dropped Mari at school and drove to work and sat through meetings where nobody knew I was falling apart inside. Rebuilding. Like I was a house that had been damaged by a storm, like I could just replace the broken pieces and move on. But some things can't be rebuilt. Some damage goes too deep. And the worst part wasn't what the divorce had done to me. It was what it was doing to Mari. She didn't talk about it much. 7-year-olds don't have the vocabulary for that kind of pain. They don't know how to say, I feel abandoned, or I'm scared that everyone I love will leave. They just feel it. Carry it around inside them like a weight they can't put down. I saw it in the little things. The way she watched the front door every evening, perking up at any sound in the hallway. The way she asked about her father constantly. When is Daddy coming? Is Daddy going to call tonight? Does Daddy still love me? That last question nearly broke me. I told her yes. Of course, yes. Daddy loves you more than anything. Daddy's just busy right now. Daddy has a lot going on. Lies. More lies. The kind we tell children to protect them from truths too ugly to face. Because the reality was that Corbin was disappearing from her life, one cancelled visit at a time. The custody agreement had been simple enough on paper. He got Mari every other weekend, Wednesday night dinners, holidays split evenly. It sounded fair in the lawyer's office, typed up in language that made it seem binding and permanent. Reality was different. The first month, he showed up twice. The second month, once. By the third month, his visits had become sporadic at best, cancelled at the last minute with vague excuses about work emergencies or travel complications or something coming up. Something was always coming up, and that something had a name. Brinley. She'd moved into Corbin's new apartment almost immediately after the divorce was finalized. From what I could piece together through Mari's confused reports, she wasn't exactly the nurturing type. Mari mentioned that Brinley didn't like when she left toys in the living room. That Brinley thought children should eat dinner at the kitchen counter, not at the table with the adults. That Brinley sighed a lot when Mari asked questions. That Brinley had rules about noise and mess and how much space a 7-year-old was allowed to occupy. My daughter had become an inconvenience in her father's new life, and she knew it. Kids always know, even when you try to hide it from them. They feel the shift in energy, the hesitation in voices, the forced smiles that don't reach the eyes. Mari had started coming home from Corbin's apartment quieter than when she left, more careful, like she'd learned to make herself smaller to avoid taking up too much room. It made me want to drive to his fancy new apartment and burn it to the ground. Instead, I did what mothers do. I held her tighter, made her favorite meals, let her sleep in my bed when the nightmares came. Told her over and over that she was loved, that she was enough, that none of this was her fault. But I couldn't fix what her father was breaking. I couldn't force him to show up. I couldn't make him choose his daughter over his new girlfriend. All I could do was be there to pick up the pieces every time he let her down. It was a Sunday in late November when something finally cracked. The day had started hopeful. Mari had been counting down since Wednesday. Daddy was supposed to take her to the zoo. She'd talked about it all week. The penguins she wanted to see, the gift shop, the ice cream he always bought her. She woke up early that morning, put on her favorite dress without being asked, brushed her own hair, which she never did voluntarily, drew him a picture, a family portrait with the three of us, plus a yellow sun in the corner and a rainbow stretched across the top. She asked me to help her wrap it in tissue paper like a present. I should have prepared her, should have said something about how plans sometimes change, how Daddy loves her even when he's busy. But I didn't, because part of me still wanted to believe that he'd show up this time, that he'd remember he had a daughter who adored him, that he'd choose her. Just once. He didn't. The text came at 11:47 a.m. I was in the kitchen, pretending not to watch Mari on the couch with her wrapped present in her lap, her legs swinging with anticipation. Something came up. Next weekend. Promise. I stared at my phone. Read the message 3 times. Felt my blood pressure rise with each reading. Something came up. Like our daughter was an appointment he could reschedule. Like her heart wasn't sitting on that couch, waiting for a father who couldn't be bothered to show up. I wanted to call him, scream at him, demand to know what could possibly be more important than his 7-year-old daughter in her favorite dress, holding a picture she'd spent an hour drawing. I wanted to tell him exactly what kind of damage he was doing, how she cried herself to sleep on nights after his cancellations, how she'd started asking if he had a new family now that he liked better. But I didn't call, because screaming at Corbin wouldn't change anything. It never had. I put the phone down, took a breath, walked into the living room and sat next to Mari. She looked at me. Her face already knew the answer before I said anything. He's not coming, is he? Her voice was flat, resigned, the kind of tone no 7-year-old should know how to produce. It was the sound of a child who'd learned to stop hoping, who'd built armor around her expectations because disappointment had become too familiar. It shattered something inside me that I didn't know was still intact. No, baby, not today. She didn't cry, just nodded slowly, like she'd been expecting this all along. Set the wrapped present on the coffee table, stared at it for a long moment. "Can we make cookies?" she asked finally. "Yeah." I pulled her into my arms, kissed her forehead, held her against my chest. "We can make cookies. Double chocolate?" Double chocolate. We spent the afternoon in the kitchen, measured flour, cracked eggs, argued about how many chocolate chips was too many. I let her lick the spoon, let her eat raw dough even though I always said not to, let her put way too much frosting on top. By the time the first batch came out of the oven, she was laughing again. The sound of it filled the apartment like warmth. I wanted to kill Corbin. Instead, I measured more flour and pretended everything was fine. That evening, around 7 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. My mother would have called first. The neighbors didn't knock. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, walked to the door, and checked the peephole. My heart stopped. Maron Callister was standing in the hallway. For a long moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, couldn't convince myself that what I was seeing was real. 10 years. 10 years since I'd walked out of his penthouse. 10 years since I'd burned his letters and blocked his number and convinced myself I'd made the right choice. 10 years of building a life without him, of marrying someone else, of becoming a mother, of becoming a completely different person. And now he was here, on the other side of my door, as if no time had passed at all. But time had passed. I could see it in his face. He was older. The boyishness I remembered had sharpened into something more severe. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, a weariness in his posture that spoke of hard years and difficult decisions. His jaw was more defined. His shoulders seemed heavier, like they'd been carrying weight for a long time. But those eyes, dark, deep, impossibly intense, were exactly the same. The eyes that had seen me when no one else did. The eyes that haunted dreams I'd never admitted to having. He stood with his hands in his pockets, patient, like he had all the time in the world. Like he would wait there forever if that's what it took. My hand moved to the doorknob before my brain could stop it. I turned the lock, pulled the door open, and there he was, close enough to touch. Close enough that I could smell his cologne, different than before, more refined, but with something familiar underneath. Neither of us spoke. 10 years of silence stretched between us like a living thing. Ellery, my name in his voice. After all this time, it landed somewhere deep, somewhere I thought I'd sealed off permanently. Maron. I gripped the doorframe to keep myself steady. How did you find me? He didn't answer right away, just stood there, drinking me in like a man who'd been wandering a desert and finally found water. His gaze traveled over my face, cataloguing the changes, searching for the girl he used to know. Your ex-husband's firm handled a case for one of my subsidiaries, he said finally. Your name came up in the paperwork, the divorce proceedings. So you tracked me down. I wasn't looking for you. His voice was quiet, honest. I'd stopped looking years ago, but when I saw your name, when I realized you were in the city again. He trailed off, shook his head. I couldn't not come. Part of me wanted to slam the door in his face. Part of me wanted to invite him in, pour him a drink, pretend the last decade hadn't happened. I stood frozen between those impulses, unable to choose either one. It's been 10 years, Maron. I know. I'm not the same person. Neither am I. I studied his face, searching for the boy I'd loved. He was still there, underneath the severity, underneath the years. But there were new layers now. Pain I didn't recognize. Secrets I couldn't read. A heaviness that hadn't existed in the man who used to read me poetry in Central Park. What do you want? He laughed softly. Not bitter, just tired. I've been asking myself that question since I got in the car to drive here, rehearsing speeches, planning what I'd say. And, standing here, looking at you, all of those speeches seem ridiculous. Try one anyway. He took a breath, met my eyes directly. I thought about you every day for 10 years. I built my company to prove I was more than my family's money, to prove I was worthy of the kind of respect you wanted to give me. And I told myself it wasn't about you, that I was doing it for myself. But that was a lie. He paused. It was always about you. Everything was always about you. My throat tightened. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to not believe him. I didn't know which was more dangerous. Can I come in? I shouldn't have said yes. Every instinct told me to close the door, to protect myself. to keep the past where it belonged. But something stronger than instinct was pulling at me, something that had been buried for a decade, clawing its way back to the surface. 5 minutes, I said. That's all. He stepped into my apartment like he was entering sacred ground. Careful, reverent, taking in every detail. The small kitchen, the worn couch, the crayon drawings taped to the refrigerator, the tiny shoes lined up by the door. His eyes lingered on the shoes, on the drawings, on the evidence of a life I'd built without him. You have a daughter. It wasn't a question. He'd already seen the proof everywhere. Mari, she's 7. Something flickered across his face, an emotion I couldn't identify. He nodded slowly, processing the information like it carried weight beyond its surface meaning. The drawings are beautiful. She's talented. I crossed my arms, keeping distance between us. Look, Maron, I don't know what you're expecting here. I'm not the girl you knew. I'm divorced. I have a child. I have stretch marks and baggage and a life that looks nothing like what it was when we were together. He turned to face me fully. You think any of that changes how I feel? It should. It doesn't. He stepped closer, not touching, but close enough that the air between us felt charged. I've waited 10 years for you, Ellery. I told myself to move on, dated other women, tried to forget. None of it worked because none of them were you. Don't say things like that. Why not? Because they're not fair. My voice cracked, despite my best efforts to control it. You can't just show up at my door after a decade and tell me you've been thinking about me every day. You can't just walk back into my life and expect everything to make sense. I don't expect anything. His voice was gentle. I just needed you to know that I never stopped, that watching you walk away was the hardest thing I ever survived, that I let you go because I thought it was what you wanted, not because I stopped loving you. You let me go? You asked me to. You should have fought harder. The words escaped before I could stop them. Raw, honest. A truth I'd been carrying for 10 years without ever admitting it, even to myself. His expression shifted. Pain and regret mingled together, aging him in that moment. I know, he said softly. I know I should have, and I've regretted it every single day since. We stood there, inches apart, a decade of silence dissolving between us. Mommy, who's that? Mari's voice cut through the moment like a blade. I stepped back from Maron immediately, turning to face my daughter with what I hoped was a reassuring smile. She was standing in the hallway, still in her favorite dress from earlier, her hair slightly mussed from lying on the couch. Her eyes moved between me and the stranger in our living room, curious but cautious. Assessing, this is an old friend, baby. He just stopped by to say hello. She studied Maron with the fearless directness only children possess. No social filters, no polite pretense. Just pure, unguarded scrutiny. What's your name? Maron. He crouched down to her level, his severe expression softening into something almost gentle. And you must be Mari. Your mum was just telling me about you. Do you like cookies? We made double chocolate. I love cookies. She grinned. I'll get you one. Before I could stop her, she ran off toward the kitchen. I watched her go, my heart constricting with a protectiveness I couldn't fully explain. Then I turned back to Maron and froze. He was still crouching, but his face had changed completely. The softness was gone, replaced by something else, something that looked almost like recognition. His eyes were fixed on the space where Mari had disappeared, and there was an intensity in his gaze that made my blood run cold. Maron? He blinked, stood up slowly, but the expression didn't entirely disappear. It lingered at the edges of his face, hiding in the corners of his eyes. She's beautiful, he said quietly. She looks just like you. Everyone says that. He nodded, but something was off. Something in the way he held himself had shifted. How old did you say she was? The question landed strangely, too casual for the weight behind it. 7. He was quiet for a moment. I watched his face, searching for clues, trying to understand what I was seeing. There was a calculation happening behind his eyes, a connection being made that I couldn't follow. 7, he repeated softly, almost to himself. Before I could press him, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I walked over, glanced at the screen. Unknown number. Something cold moved through me. I opened the message. Read it once. Read it again. Felt the room tilt beneath my feet. He's lying to you. He's always been lying to you. And if you let him back in, you'll lose everything, including your daughter. The phone nearly slipped from my fingers. My hands were trembling. My mind was racing through possibilities, through explanations, through all the ways this couldn't be happening. Ellery? Maron's voice came from behind me. Concerned. What's wrong? I turned around, held up the phone so he could see the screen, watched his face as he read the message. He went pale, completely, utterly pale. The color drained from his face like water from a sink. Maron. My voice was ice. Who sent this? I don't know. You're lying. I'm not. Don't. I stepped back from him, putting distance between us, feeling every protective instinct in my body flare to life. Someone just sent me a message threatening my daughter, and you're standing in my apartment lying to my face about not knowing who it is. I don't know who sent it. His voice was strained, desperate, but I think I know what it might be about. Then tell me. He hesitated, just a fraction of a second, but it was enough. I can't, not yet. There are things I need to figure out first, things I need to confirm before you what? I was trembling now, fear and anger tangled together, making my voice shake. You show up after 10 years, you tell me you've been waiting for me, and now someone is watching us, watching my daughter, and you can't explain any of it. I will explain, I promise you, but not tonight, not like this. Mari appeared in the kitchen doorway, a cookie in each hand. She looked between us again, sensing the tension, her little face creasing with worry. Is everything okay, Mommy? Everything's fine, baby. I forced my voice to soften, forced a smile I didn't feel. My friend was just leaving. Maron looked at me, then at Mari, then back at me. Something shifted in his expression, resignation mixed with determination, like a man who knew he'd lost this battle but had no intention of surrendering the war. I'll go, he said quietly. But I'm not disappearing again. I made that mistake once. I won't make it twice. He moved toward the door, stopped with his hand on the knob, turned back one last time. Whatever that message says, whatever you're thinking right now, I would never hurt you, or her. You have to believe that. I don't have to believe anything. He nodded slowly, accepting it. Then he opened the door and stepped into the hallway. I've waited 10 years for you, Ellery. I can wait a little longer for you to trust me again. Then, he was gone. I locked the door behind him, checked it twice, then sank onto the couch, my phone still clutched in my hand, the anonymous message still glowing on the screen. Someone knew Maron was here. Someone had been watching. And whatever secret he was carrying, whatever truth he couldn't tell me yet, it was somehow connected to my daughter. Mari climbed onto the couch beside me, offering one of her cookies. Mommy, why do you look scared? I pulled her close, kissed the top of her head, held her like she might disappear if I let go. I'm not scared, baby. I'm just tired. Another lie. The kind mothers tell to protect their children from truths too heavy to carry. But the truth was there, waiting in the shadows. And it was only a matter of time before it came into the light. If this story is hitting you right now, if you feel that tension in your chest, do me a favor. Hit that like button, and if you know someone who's been through heartbreak, who's been lied to, who's trying to figure out who to trust, share this with them. This story isn't over, not even close. After Maron left, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the anonymous text burning in my mind like a brand. Someone was watching. Someone knew Maron had been here. Someone felt threatened enough to send warnings about my daughter. My daughter. The way Maron had looked at Mari kept replaying in my head. That flash of recognition, that intensity, the way he'd asked her age with such careful casualness. 7 years old. I sat up in bed, my heart suddenly racing. Started doing math I'd avoided for years, counting backwards, remembering dates I'd trained myself to forget. No, I was being paranoid. The timing was clear. I'd been with Corbin for months before Mari was conceived. The doctors said she came early. Babies do that. It happens all the time, but doubt, once planted, grows like a weed. I got out of bed, checked on Mari. She was sleeping peacefully, one arm wrapped around the stuffed elephant Corbin had given her for her 5th birthday. Back when he still showed up for birthdays. I pulled her blanket up, kissed her forehead, and crept back to my room. Something else was nagging at me. Something Corbin had said during one of our fights near the end. We'd been arguing about money, about custody, about who got to keep what, and he'd gotten this look on his face, cold, superior, like he knew something I didn't. You don't know everything about everyone, Ellery. Sometimes people keep secrets to protect you, sometimes they keep them to protect themselves. I'd dismissed it as another one of his manipulations. But now, at 2 in the morning, with that anonymous text glowing in my memory, his words felt different. Felt like a clue. Our old house hadn't sold yet. Still on the market. Still technically half mine. And I still had the keys. I shouldn't have gone. I knew that even as I was pulling on jeans and a sweater, even as I was checking that Mari was still asleep, even as I was grabbing my keys and heading for the door. But I had to know. Whatever Corbin had been hiding, whatever secrets he'd been keeping, I needed to find them. Because someone out there knew things about my life that I didn't, and that terrified me more than any text message. The drive to our old neighborhood took 20 minutes. Every familiar street felt like traveling backwards through time. Past the coffee shop where Corbin and I used to get breakfast on Sundays. Past the park where Mari learned to ride a bike. Past the life I'd thought was permanent. The house sat dark at the end of the cul-de-sac. The for sale sign looked ghostly in the moonlight. No cars in the driveway, no lights in the windows. Just a shell of a home that used to hold a family. I parked across the street, sat there for a moment, second-guessing myself. This was crazy. I was acting like a character in a thriller, sneaking into houses in the middle of the night, looking for secrets that might not even exist. But I got out anyway. Walked up the familiar driveway, used my key. The house smelled different, empty, like no one lived there anymore, which I guess was true. Our furniture was gone, moved to storage or sold. The walls showed pale rectangles where pictures used to hang. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood floors. I went straight to Corbin's office. He'd always been particular about that room. His space, his sanctuary. Even during our marriage, I rarely went in there without permission. The office was empty except for the built-in bookshelves and the desk that was too heavy to move. But I wasn't interested in the visible spaces. I was interested in what he'd hidden. The safe was built into the floor, concealed under a section of hardwood that lifted up. Corbin thought I didn't know about it, but I'd seen him access it once, years ago, when he thought I was asleep. I knelt down, found the seam in the wood, lifted the panel. There it was, a small floor-safe digital lock glowing green in the darkness. The combination. What would Corbin use? His birthday? Our anniversary? Some random number I'd never guess. I tried Mari's birthday first. The date that had changed everything. The date that made us parents. The lock clicked open. Of course, even in his secrets, even in his betrayals, some part of Corbin had still been her father. Or at least, he'd thought he was. Inside the safe, stacks of documents, financial records, legal papers, and at the bottom, a manila envelope that made my hands shake before I even touched it. Confidential, paternity, written in Corbin's neat handwriting, sealed with tape that had yellowed with age. I sat back on my heels, stared at that envelope. Part of me wanted to close the safe, replace the panel, drive home and pretend I'd never been here. Because once I opened this, once I knew whatever was inside, there would be no going back. But I'd come too far to stop now. I peeled back the tape, pulled out the papers inside, and my world tilted off its axis. DNA test results. Clinical, cold, undeniable, dated 6 years ago. When Mari was 1 year old, the results were clear. Probability of paternity, 0%. Corbin was not Mari's biological father. The room spun. I pressed my palms against the floor to steady myself, the papers crumpling in my grip. This couldn't be right. The timing was clear. I'd been with Corbin for months before I got pregnant. Mari came early. The doctors said so. Everyone said so. But the tests don't lie. Science doesn't care about the stories we tell ourselves. 6 years. Corbin had known for 6 years that Mari wasn't his. He'd held this secret while I raised our daughter. While I fought with him about parenting decisions, while I begged him to be more present, more engaged, more loving toward the child I thought was his. He'd known. The whole time, he'd known. I forced myself to keep reading. There were more papers in the envelope, medical records from Mari's birth. And there, in black and white, was the truth I'd been hiding from myself. Mari wasn't early. She was exactly on time. Full term. Healthy weight. Which meant she was conceived earlier than I'd told myself. Earlier than I'd told everyone. The timeline clicked into place with sickening clarity. I'd gotten pregnant right after leaving Maron. Right after walking out of his penthouse and swearing I'd never see him again. No, that wasn't possible. We'd been careful. We'd always been careful. But my hands were shaking now, and not from the cold. Because I was remembering something else, something I'd buried so deep, I'd almost convinced myself it was a dream. A night I'd never told anyone about. A night that didn't fit into the neat story of choosing Corbin over Maron. The night that changed everything. The sound of a car engine shattered my thoughts. Headlights swept across the office windows. Someone was pulling into the driveway. I scrambled to my feet, shoving the papers back into the envelope. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Who else would be here at 3 in the morning? Who else had keys? Car doors slammed. Voices. 2 of them. 1 male, 1 female. I recognized them immediately. Corbin and Brinley. Panic flooded through me. I looked around the empty office, searching for somewhere to hide. But there was nowhere. Just blank walls and empty shelves and the open safe at my feet, announcing exactly what I'd been doing. The front door opened. Footsteps in the hallway. They were coming straight for the office. Of course they were. They were here for the safe, for the documents, for the secrets Corbin had been keeping. I stood there, clutching the envelope, as they appeared in the doorway. Corbin saw me first. His face went through a series of expressions: surprise, anger, and then something that looked almost like resignation, like he'd been expecting this moment. Brinley, behind him, looked less philosophical. What is she doing here? But Corbin's eyes were on the envelope in my hands. You found it. It wasn't a question. 6 years, I said. My voice sounded foreign to my own ears. You've known for 6 years. He walked into the room, moved past me to the safe, started pulling out the financial documents, stacking them on the floor. Yes, I've known. And you never said anything. What was I supposed to say, Ellery? He looked up at me then, and for the first time in years, I saw real emotion in his face. Pain, anger, something raw and unguarded. That I knew you were pregnant with another man's child when you married me. That I raised her anyway. That I tried to love her even though every time I looked at her I saw him. I stared at him. This man I'd been married to for 9 years. This man who'd kept the most devastating secret imaginable while sleeping beside me every night. You knew from the beginning? He went back to sorting papers. I suspected. You were so insistent about the timeline, about her being early. But I saw her, Ellery. The moment she was born, those eyes, that hair. She looked nothing like me. So, you got a DNA test. When she was 1, I had to know for sure. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Part of me hoped I was wrong, that I was just being paranoid, but deep down, I already knew. Brinley stepped into the room, her arms crossed. Can we hurry this up? I don't want to be here if someone calls the police. Corbin ignored her, kept his eyes on me. Do you want to know the really pathetic part? I was going to stay anyway. I loved you that much. I thought if I could just pretend long enough, if I could just push through, it would become true. Mari would become mine through sheer force of will. But you couldn't. No. His voice was quiet now, defeated. I couldn't. Every milestone she hit, every time she smiled, every time she did something that reminded me of him, it was like being stabbed over and over again. I was raising another man's child, Maron Callister's child. The way he said Maron's name made me flinch, like it tasted bitter. So why didn't you leave? Why stay for 7 years if it hurt that much? He stood up, faced me fully, and what I saw in his expression made my stomach drop. Because I was being paid to stay. The words hung in the air between us. I couldn't have heard him right. What? Brinley laughed. A sharp, unpleasant sound. Oh, this is the best part. Tell her about the checks, Corbin. Tell her about your monthly payments from the Callister family. I looked between them, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. You were being paid? By Maron's family? Not at first, Corbin said. He was back to sorting documents, not meeting my eyes. The first 4 years I really was trying to be a father to Mari, trying to make our marriage work, but then someone approached me, a lawyer representing the Callister interests. My legs felt weak. I leaned against the desk for support. When? 3 years ago. Right around the time Mari started school. They'd done their research, figured out who she really was, and they made me an offer. To stay quiet. To maintain the status quo. He looked up at me then. 20,000 a month, deposited into an offshore account. All I had to do was keep being her father on paper, keep my mouth shut about her real paternity. 20,000 a month. For 3 years. I did the math quickly. Over $700,000. That's why you started pulling away, I said slowly. That's why you became so distant. It wasn't just Brinley. You were being paid to pretend. I was being paid to protect their interests, he corrected. The Callisters have an empire to think about. Inheritance laws, stock prices, public perception. An illegitimate grandchild could complicate things. Mari is not illegitimate. No? Then what is she, Ellery? The product of a 2-month fling with a billionaire? The daughter you tried to pass off as mine? His words were cruel, but they were also true. I had tried to pass her off as his. I had lied to everyone, including myself. I thought she was yours, I said weakly. The timing was never going to work, and you knew it. His voice was harder now. You just wanted it to be true, just like I did. We were both so desperate to make this normal, respectable life work that we ignored reality. Brinley was getting impatient. Corbin, we need to go. Get the account information and let's leave. But I wasn't done. Who else knows about the payments? Just the lawyer who approached me and whoever hired him. Corbin pulled out a folder from the stack. I never dealt with the family directly. Everything went through intermediaries. And Maron? Does he know? Corbin studied me for a long moment. You really don't get it, do you? Maron Callister doesn't just randomly show up at your door after 10 years. The family doesn't do coincidences. They do chess moves, and you just became a pawn. You think they sent him? I think nothing happens in that family without careful planning. He closed the safe, pocketed the folder. If Maron's here now, it's because someone decided it was time. The question is why? Maybe he just... What? Missed you? Couldn't stay away any longer? Corbin shook his head. You're naive, Ellery. The Callisters don't operate on emotion. They operate on strategy. And right now, you and Mari are part of some game you don't even know you're playing. I thought about the anonymous text. The warning. Was it really a threat? Or was someone trying to protect us? The text messages, I said suddenly. Did you send them? What text messages? I pulled out my phone, showed him the anonymous warning. He read it, his expression unreadable. No, he said finally. But I'm not surprised someone did. You're not the only one with something to lose here, Ellery. There are people who've built their lives around keeping the Callister secrets buried. If Maron's making moves, they'll push back. People like who? I don't know. I made it a point not to know. He walked toward the door, then stopped, turned back. But I'll tell you this much, be careful. The kind of money we're talking about, the kind of power. It makes people dangerous, even people who seem like they care about you. Like you cared about me? He flinched. I did care. I stayed for 7 years, didn't I? Even when it was killing me. You stayed for the money. I stayed for a lot of reasons. The money just made it easier to swallow. He paused. And before you judge me too harshly, remember, you lied too. Every day for 7 years. Every time you looked at Mari and told her daddy loved her. Every time you let me struggle with bonding with a child who was never mine. The truth of it hit me like a physical blow. We'd both been lying, creating this elaborate fiction of a family that never really existed. What happens now? I asked. With the payments? They stopped 6 months ago, right after the divorce was finalized. My obligation ended when I stopped being her legal father. He looked at me one more time. Whatever happens next, Ellery, it's on you. You and Maron can figure out what to do with your daughter. She's not his daughter. The words came out automatically, desperately. We don't even know for sure. Don't. Corbin's voice was sharp. Don't stand there and lie to me anymore. You know exactly whose daughter she is. You've probably always known deep down, just like I did. Brinley tugged at his arm. Corbin, we need to go, now. But he wasn't finished. You want to know the really sick part? I actually feel sorry for you, because you're about to learn what I learned 7 years ago. The Callisters don't let go of what's theirs, ever, and whether you like it or not, Mari is theirs. He started to leave, then turned back one last time. Oh, and Ellery, that lock on your apartment door, the one you think keeps you safe? Maron walked through it tonight because he wanted you to know he could. The Callisters have keys to doors you don't even know exist. Physical ones, legal ones, financial ones. They're probably already 10 moves ahead of whatever you're planning. You're trying to scare me. I'm trying to warn you, there's a difference. His expression softened slightly. Despite everything, I don't want to see you hurt, or Mari. She's innocent in all of this. Then help me protect her. He shook his head. I'm done, Ellery. I played my part. I kept their secret. I took their money, and now I'm walking away clean. He paused at the door. If you're smart, you'll take Mari and disappear. Go somewhere the Callisters can't find you. Start over. It's the only way you'll ever be free. I can't just run. Then you'd better be prepared to fight. And trust me, you have no idea what you're up against. They left. I heard their car start, heard the engine fade into the distance. And I was alone in the empty house with the truth I'd been running from for 7 years. I sank to the floor, still clutching the paternity test results. The clinical language blurred as tears filled my eyes. Not tears of sadness, tears of recognition. Because Corbin was right, I had known. Some part of me had always known. The way Mari tilted her head when she was thinking, exactly like Maron used to do. The way she got lost in her own imagination, creating elaborate stories from nothing. Her eyes. Those impossibly dark eyes that looked nothing like mine or Corbin's. I'd seen Maron in her from the beginning, and I'd chosen to ignore it. Chosen to believe the lie because it was easier than facing what I'd done. But now, the lie was shattered. The truth was out there, documented in black and white. And somewhere in this city, powerful people were making decisions about my daughter's future, about my future. The anonymous texter was right. If I let Maron back in, I could lose everything. But looking at the evidence scattered around me, I realized something else. I'd already lost everything. My marriage, built on a lie. My security, sold for monthly payments. My belief that I could protect Mari from the truth about who she really was. The only question now was what I was going to do about it. I gathered up the papers, put them back in the envelope, and made a decision that would change everything. I was going to confront Maron, tonight, and this time I was going to demand the whole truth, even if it destroyed us all. But first, I needed to remember, really remember. Not the sanitized version I'd been telling myself for years, but the truth about what happened after I walked out of Maron's penthouse. I drove home from the empty house in a daze. The envelope full of secrets sat on the passenger seat like a living thing. By the time I reached my apartment, The sun was starting to rise, painting the Brooklyn streets in pale gold. Mari was still asleep. I checked on her, then went to my room and sat on the bed, closed my eyes, and let myself go back to that night 10 years ago. The night I'd tried to erase from history. I'd left Maron's penthouse devastated. The betrayal of his hidden wealth, the impossibility of our different worlds, the fear of becoming some cliché. It all crashed over me as I rode the elevator down from his perfect life to my messy one. I took the subway home, cried the whole way. People looked at me with that particular New York mix of concern and determination not to get involved. Just another girl with a broken heart on public transportation. But I didn't go to my apartment. I couldn't face my roommate's questions, couldn't sit in my tiny room and think about what I'd just thrown away. Instead, I got off at Times Square, walked into the first hotel bar I saw. It was one of those places that catered to tourists and businessmen. Overpriced drinks, dim lighting, the kind of place where you could disappear for a while. I ordered whiskey. I never drank whiskey, but it seemed like what you ordered when your life was falling apart. The bartender didn't card me, didn't ask if I was okay, just poured. I sat at that bar for 2 hours, drinking, crying, texting friends, and deleting the messages before sending them. I was 22 years old, and I'd just walked away from the only person who'd ever really seen me. Because I was scared, because I was proud, because I couldn't imagine a world where someone like me ended up with someone like him. The whiskey made everything soft around the edges, made the pain bearable, made my decision feel less final. I was about to order another drink when I felt someone sit down beside me. I knew it was him before I turned around. The cologne, the way the air changed when he was near, the gravitational pull I'd been fighting since the day we met. "How did you find me?" Maron looked terrible. His hair was messed up. His expensive suit was wrinkled. He looked like he'd been walking the city for hours, searching. "I know you, Ellery. When you're upset, you don't go home. You go somewhere you can be anonymous." He gestured at the bar. "This is the third place I checked. You shouldn't have come. You shouldn't have left." We sat in silence. The bar noise washed over us. Laughter from a group of tourists, sports commentary from the TV, the clink of glasses and ice. Normal sounds from a world that suddenly felt very far away. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "I should have told you about the money, about my family. I was a coward." "Yes, you were. But I meant what I said. I wanted you to know me, the real me. Not the Callister heir or the trust fund or any of that noise, just me." I turned to look at him then, really look, and what I saw broke my heart all over again. Because he was telling the truth, in his eyes, in the way he held himself, in the desperate edge to his voice. He was just Maron, the man who read poetry in the park, who brought me coffee when I was tired, who listened to my stories like they were the most important words ever spoken. "It doesn't change anything," I said. "We're from different worlds. Then let's make our own world." "That's not how life works." "Why not?" He leaned closer. "Why can't we write our own rules? Why does my family's money have to define us?" "Because it does. Because it always will. Every restaurant we eat at, every gift you give me, every plan we make, it'll all be colored by the fact that you can afford anything and I can barely afford rent. Then I'll give it up." I laughed, but it came out broken. "You can't give up who you are. Watch me." He was serious. In that moment, sitting in that tourist bar with whiskey warming my blood and tears drying on my cheeks, he was completely serious. "Don't," I said. "Don't make promises you can't keep. Don't turn this into some romantic movie where love conquers everything. We both know how this ends." "No, we don't." He took my hand. "The only thing I know is that I love you. Everything else is just details." I should have pulled away, should have finished my drink, paid my tab, and walked out of that bar forever. But I didn't. Instead, I let him lead me upstairs. The hotel room was generic. Beige walls, stiff white sheets, the kind of place meant for temporary stays and forgotten encounters. But with Maron there, it became something else, a space outside of time, a world where the morning wouldn't come, and choices didn't have consequences, We didn't talk about the future, didn't talk about his money or my fear or the impossibility of us. We just existed in that room, in that moment, like we were the only two people left on Earth. It was different than before, desperate, intense, like we were trying to compress a lifetime into a single night. Like we both knew this was goodbye, even if we couldn't say it out loud. I memorized everything. The way his hands shook when he touched me. The way he whispered my name like a prayer. The way the city lights filtered through the curtains, painting shadows on the walls. When it was over, we lay there in the dark, not speaking. His arm around me, my head on his chest. The sound of traffic far below, the city continuing its relentless pace while we stayed frozen in our bubble. "Come away with me," he said suddenly. "Right now, we'll get on a plane, go somewhere they can't find us, start over." "Maron." "I'm serious. I have money they don't even know about. We could disappear, live simply, be happy." For a moment, I let myself imagine it. Some small coastal town where nobody knew the Callister name. A little house, a garden, Maron teaching music to local kids, while I wrote stories at a desk by the window. It was beautiful and impossible. "We can't," I whispered. "Why not?" "Because running away doesn't change who we are. Your family would find you, the money would follow, and I'd spend my whole life wondering if you resented me for making you give it all up." "I would never—" "You don't know that. You can't know that." I sat up, pulling the sheet around me. "This is the real world, Maron, and in the real world, love isn't enough." He was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was resigned. "So, this is it. This is it." He got up, started getting dressed. I watched him in the darkness, memorizing the shape of him, knowing I'd never see him like this again. At the door, he stopped, came back to the bed, kissed me one last time. "I'll wait for you," he said. "However long it takes, I'll wait." "Don't." "I will, anyway." And then he was gone. I heard the door close, heard his footsteps fade down the hallway, and I was alone in that generic room with the echo of what we'd done. I got dressed, went home, took a shower that lasted until the water ran cold, and tried to wash away the memory of that night. 2 weeks later, I met Corbin at a coffee shop. Safe, stable Corbin, who would never make me feel like I was drowning in possibility. 6 weeks after that, I realized I was pregnant, and I convinced myself the timing worked. Convinced myself so thoroughly that I almost believed it. Until tonight, when all my carefully constructed lies came crashing down. Sometimes the lies we tell ourselves are more dangerous than the lies others tell us. If you've ever convinced yourself something was true because you needed it to be, you know exactly what I'm feeling right now. Let me know in the comments, what would you do? And remember to subscribe, because what happens next changes everything for Mari.